We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Tesam and Beis and Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 99b. On the previous Zama, the Gemara said that a person can watch himself and be careful from some kinds of tumah and maybe not from other kinds of tumah, essentially guard himself halfway. And the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a brisa to support that. Let's say a person has a basket on his head, umagrefa besocho, and there's a shovel inside of it. V'yomer, and he says, libi al hasal, he says, I'm paying attention to the basket, ve'in libi al hamagrefa, but I'm not paying attention to the shovel. So then we say it splits, hasal tahar. We say that the basket is pure, v'hamagrefa tameya, and we say that the magrefa, we say that the shovel is tamei. The Gemara asks, usatami magrefa lasal, but why don't we say that the shovel makes the basket tamei? To that, the Gemara says, "Ein kli metame kli." One vessel is not metame another vessel. The Gemara says further, "Usatame masha besocho." But why doesn't it cause that which is in the basket to become tame? And the Gemara says to that, "Omar Rava." Rava says, "Ba'omer." The person says, "Shemartia midavar hamitama." I am guarding it from something that would give it a tumah that could bring tumah to something else. That I'm protecting it from. Velo shemartia midavar haposla. But I'm not guarding it from something that would just disqualify it, but it would not pass along that tumah. And Rashi explains, Libi al hasal shomro midavar hametama. Again, the Gemara said that I'm paying attention to the basket to protect it, and then from something that would be metama, meaning av hatuma, shemetame kli, meaning to say, let's say I'm protecting it from an av hatuma, which is metame a vessel, v'chein mitumas durabonan hametamos osa, and also from tuma durabonan, which would make it tame, letame chulin utruma midrabonan, to cause chulin and truma to be tame midrabonan. That I'm watching it from. Velo midavar haposla lechulin v'letruma, but not from something. I'm not protecting it from something that would disqualify it for chulin and truma. Umiyut but nevertheless it is tamei in terms of using it with kodshim. And the Gemara continues, Igalgil Milsa, in any case, the matter circulated, Umati Lakamid Rabbi Abba Bar Memel, and it came before Rabbi Abba Bar Memel. Rashi explains, Igalgil Milsa, Hadra Minhu La'el Masnisin de Onein. We had a contradiction between Mishnayos before. Again, when it comes to an Onein, it said in our Mishnah that an Onein is able to touch, meaning to say is able to touch Kodshim. And then it said in the Mishnah in Meseches Chagiga that he has to immerse. And we were giving these forced answers in order to try to answer the contradiction in Mishnayos. And so it came before Rabbi Abba Bar Memel and Amar Lahu. So he said to them, Lo Shmiya Lahu Hadam Rabbi Yochanan, you did not hear that which Rabbi Yochanan said. And some have the Girsa here of Hada Amar Rabbi Yonasan, that which Rabbi Yonasan said, Amar Rebbe, that Rebbe said, Ha'ochel shlishi shel truma, one who eats truma which has third degree tumah, so aser lechol mutter liga, such an individual, it's forbidden for him to eat truma, but he's allowed to touch truma. So Alma, so we see from that, Ba'achila, Avud Rabbanan Maila, when it comes to eating, the Rabbanan can impose a stringency, but Benegia, when it comes to touching, Lo Avud Rabbanan Maila, there the Rabbanan did not impose a stringency, and essentially the Gemara is answering that the Mishnah and Chagiga, which requires an onein immerse for kodshim, that's for eating kodshim. There we make a stringency. But our Mishnah, which says that the onein can touch kodshim, so since it's just touching, there we don't have that stringency. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, ve'eno cholek lechol, it said in the Mishnah that an onein does not receive a share in the karbonos. And the Gemara says, Miflag hudalo polik, so the Mishnah is saying that he doesn't receive a share. But however, but if they invite him to eat, so he is in fact allowed to eat. Rashi explains, Ki mizamni im zimno chavero kohen lechol imo le'erev bechelko, but kodshim ochel, if his friend who's a kohen invites him that night to eat his portion of the kodshim, that he is allowed, he's allowed to eat in such a situation. And so the Gemara continues and asks, Uraminhi, we have the following contradiction. And this is from a Mishnah in Meseches Psachim, Onen, when it comes to a person who's in a period of acute mourning, Tovel va'ochel es pischo la'erev, he can immerse and he can eat his carbon Pesach in the evening, avalo b'kodshim, but he's not allowed to eat kodshim. And so that seems to contradict what our Mishnah is saying. Our Mishnah is saying that the Onen is allowed to eat kodshim if he's invited. He doesn't get a share, but he can eat it. And in the Mishnah Psachim, it seems he cannot eat it. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rav Yirmiyah midifti, Rav Yirmiyah midifti says, Lo kash, it's not difficult, kan b'Pesach, kan b'shar yemos hashana. Here we're talking about on Pesach, and in the other case we're talking during other times of the year, as the Gemara continues and explains. But Pesach, when it comes to Pesach, Aidi de achel Pesach, since he's already eating the carbon Pesach, that's mutter. So achel nami kodshim, he can also eat other kodshim. The onen can eat other kodshim as well, and that's what our Mishnah is referring to. But b'shari yemos hashana, during other times of the year, the lo chazi, so there it's not fit. He's not having Karban Pesach at that time, so therefore he's not eating from other kachim as well. And the Gemara continues, umay avalo b'kachim, but according to that, what does it mean when it says in the Mishnah Pesachim that he can't have kachim? It means avalo b'kachim shall kol hashana. It means that he can't have kachim throughout the year during other times of the year, but he is able to have kachim when he's eating the Karban Pesach. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Ravasi Yomer, Ravasi says, Lokash, it's not difficult. Kan shemeis lo meis bi'arba aser, v'kavro b'arba aser. In one case, we're talking where he became an onain because his relative died on the 14th of Nisan, and the relative was buried on the 14th of Nisan. That is a stronger kind of aninus. That's why kachim are not going to be allowed to such an onain that evening. But kan shemeis lo meis b'shlosha aser. But in the case where we say that kachim is permitted, that's our Mishnah. That's when the relative died on the 13th, the kavro be'arba aser, and there the burial took place on the 14th. So Yom Kavura, so the day of burial, lo tafis leilo midrabanan. So there we don't say that the night follows that period of aninus is not so strict that night, and so therefore again in that situation we're going to say that kachim are permitted. And the Gemara continues, man tana aninus laila midrabanan. Now who's the tana that says that aninus laila, again that the aninus at night is just a drabanan? The Gemara says Rabbi Shimon, it's the tana Rabbi Shimon. The tanya, as we learned in a braysa, aninos laila midivrei Torah, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says aninos in the night is a doraisa. Rabbi Shimon Omer onein eino midivrei Torah ela midivrei Sofrim. It's not doraisa, it's only drabanan. Teda, you should know, Sharei Amru, they say onein tovel v'ochel as pischo la'erev avalo b'kachim, that an onein can immerse and eat his Karban Pesach in the evening, but he cannot have kachim. And Rashi explains, Ravasi Yomer, Ravasi says, idi v'idi b'leilei psachim, both the Mishnah here and the Mishnah in Meseches Psachim are on the night of Pesach. V'lo kash, it's not difficult. Ahid the Psachim, in the case of Psachim where we are strict, shemeis b'yadalid v'kavro b'yadalid, the relative died on the 14th and was buried on the 14th. Hilkach b'Pesach ochel avalo b'kachim, therefore he can eat Karban Pesach and not kachim. The aninos laila d'yom misa d'Rabbanan, because the aninos of the night, of the day of the death, the following night, is d'Rabbanan. Umas nisan kashemeis b'yad gimel v'kavro b'yadalid. Our Mishnah is when the relative died on the 13th and was buried on the 14th. The Yom Kavura Gufei D'Rabbanan, because the day of burial itself is just D'Rabbanan. V'leilo lo tafis afilu midrabbanan, so the night it's not going to apply even on a D'Rabbanan level. The Gemara then said, Man tana de tana lahach de psachim d'isle aninos leil yom misa D'Rabbanan. Who's the tana in psachim that says that aninos at the night of the day of the death is D'Rabbanan? Again, midivrei Torah, the first opinion was it's doraisa, that's Rabbi Yehuda. L'kamon yolef lo Rabbi Yehuda b'shmaitin ma'aninos the Aaron uvanav. Rabbi Yehuda is going to learn that later on from the aninos of Aaron and his sons. And then the Gemara said, Teda, you should know, Sharei Onein, I'll prove that it's just a Rabbanan because the Onein can have the Karban Pesach. V'i doraisa Pesach nami lo lechel. If it was doraisa, he would not even be able to eat the Karban Pesach. And the Gemara continues and asks, V'savar Rabbi Shimon aninos laila midrabanan. Does Rabbi Shimon really hold that aninos at night is only midrabanan? V'atanya, but we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Onein eino mishaleach karbanos, of an Onein cannot send his karbanos. My lava afilu b'Pesach. Doesn't that mean even on Pesach we're strict? That sounds like it's doraisa. The Gemara says, Lo no levar mi Pesach. It means with the exception of the Karban Pesach. The Gemara continues, V'atanya, but didn't we learn in a brayso, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Shlomim. It says in the pasuk Shlomim, Kishu shalem mevi, when he's whole, he can bring a carbon. Ve'eno mevi kishu onein, he cannot bring the carbon when he's an onein. Minayin l'rabos asatoda, from where we know to include toda as well. Marba ani asatoda shekein nechelos besimcha, the toda is supposed to be eaten besimcha, so an onein is excluded. Kishlomim, just like a shlomim, it's eaten besimcha. And minayin l'rabos asaola, how do we know to include ola? Marba ani asaola shekein ba b'neder u'v'nedava, we include ola as well. It's able to be given as a neder and nedava, as donation. Kishlomim, just like a shlomim. And minayin l'rabos bechoru ma'isru pesach. How do we know to include bechor ma'isru and pesach? Merabani bechoru ma'isru pesach shekein einon boin al chet. We include those as well because they don't come for sin. Minayin l'rabos chatos v'yosham. From where do we know to include chatos and osham? Talmud lomar zevach. We learned that from the pasuk that says zevach, it's slaughtered. Minayin l'rabos ha'ofos v'amenachos v'hayayin v'oitzim v'alavona. From where do we know to include the bird carbon and the carbon mincha, wine and wood, and the wood and the lavona, the frankincense. Talmud lomar shlomim, it says in the pasuk, shlomim karbono, kol karbono shu mevi, means to say all karbonos that he brings, kishu shalei mevi, he brings them when he is whole, ve'eno mevi kishu onen, he cannot bring them when he is an onen. And the Gemara says, Katani Mia Pesach, doesn't it say over here Karban Pesach? It seems to be saying clearly that he's not allowed to bring Karban Pesach. We've been saying above, according to Rabbi Shimon, that he could bring Karban Pesach. And the Gemara continues and answers. Amar Rav Chisda says, Pesach kedei nas, but Pesach is in this brisa for no reason. Really, it should not be in this brisa. The Gemara continues with another answer. Rav Sheshes Amar, Rav Sheshes says, My Pesach, what does this brisa mean when it has Pesach included? It means Shalmei Pesach. It actually means the Shlomim that are brought on Pesach. Rashi says Shalmei Pesach is Chagigas Yodalid. They bring Karban Chagig on the 14th. Kishachabura Meruba. When there were a lot of people, they needed more animals for more Karbanos. So they would bring these Shalmei Pesach. It's referring to Shalmei Pesach. The Gemara says Yachiyainu Shlomim, but if so, that's the same as a Shlomim. That's already mentioned in the Brisa. The Gemara says Tana Shlomim Haboin Machmas Pesach, V'Tana Shlomim Haboin Machmas Atzman. The Brisa teaches Shlomim that come because of Pesach, and also Shlomim that come even on their own. The Ilo Tana Shlomim Haboin Machmas Pesach. If it didn't say Shlomim that come because of Pesach, Sal Gadai Dechamina, one might have thought Holo Machmas Pesach Osi, since it's because of Pesach. Kegufe the Pesach Dami. It's the same as the Karban Pesach itself. We could be lenient. Kamash Malon. So that's what the Brisa is teaching us. We don't make distinctions between different kinds of Shlomim. And the Gemara continues, Rav Mori Omar, Rav Mori says, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Amud Aleph.